Hello, my name is Hakon, and today I'm doing something different. This is the first episode of a new series I'm doing, which will have to do with typewriters. Now, some of you might have spotted behind me where I'm sitting some boxes, and well, the perceptive of you might have noticed that these are indeed typewriters. So, and uh, and today I'm going to use one of these because it just so happened that I sell typewritten texts for people typed on a real typewriter on Etsy. And today I got an order for a little text to be written out, and I thought I'd just make a little video about it while I was doing it, just to show you what I do when I do these things. So the order is for a text written on this typewriter, and I'll show it to you in a moment when I get it down on my desk. Um, it's actually the first one that I bought a few years ago. Yes, just over 2 years ago. So I'll be right back after I've adjusted my camera to show you a little bit more what I'm doing. Right, so before I actually show you the typewriter, I'll just show you how I lay out the text. Um, so this is the quote that I am typing today. It's the Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard. And it's people demand freedom of speech as a compensation for the freedom of thought, which they seldom use. I think it's a brilliant quote. It's one of my favorites. And I'll just try to line up the text now, first of all, just to make it relatively even. But this typewriter, and indeed many others, certainly from the 60s onwards, have a secret function that I will actually show you later. I call it a secret. It's was probably quite well known to people using them at the time, but for most people today, it is a complete mystery, and people don't actually realize that it's possible. So I'll show you something interesting. Now, there is a way to actually line this up even better, because this typewriter has the function of doing a half space. That is to say, you don't need to use a full character space between two characters. You can use a half space, or you can make a 1.5 space. So to line this up, I don't like using half spaces because it looks a bit cramped, but I will use 1.5 spaces to even out the lines a little bit. So of course now I'm using a fixed width font, Korean U, just a standard one. And I have calculated exactly the size I need to be equivalent to my typewriter, which is 10.9 points. And in order to make a 1.5 space, I make the spaces 50% bigger. So that's 16.35 point size. And I've just made a red star that I'm cutting and pasting now to indicate where I'm doing the half spacing. So see, with 4 half spaces, the first line lines up with the second. And 2 half spaces, and the third line lines up as well. You do want to make it look really nice. You want the full stop to actually be outside of the lines here. I'll actually remove that for now. So now I've lined up Søren Kierkegaard with the right hand side, with the right margin, and at the moment, oh, there we are. I also want this to be centered on the page, like so, because I want this to be centered before I add the full stop, because otherwise it will push it back. Oh, hang on, I will also need to do the, just, yeah, there we are. And because of the way the quote is here, and the philosopher in this case has a bit of a space between it, I don't need to adjust it upwards to make it look balanced. I think it actually looks quite nice like this. It's a bit above the center of the page. So I'll put in the full stop now, like so. And yeah. So in order to get this centered as well as possible on the page that I'm typing, I have calculated that to get the paper size to match the screen size on my screen, I zoom in to 108.41%, like so. I'll probably need to move it up a little bit now. And this is, in a moment, I'll show you the reason why I'm actually using my webcam to record this rather than my screen grabber. Because what I do, I'll just show you on let's sketch this out first. So now this sheet of paper lines up with the image on the screen, and I can put a little mark indicating where the line starts, which will make it easier for me to center it on the page of the typewriter as well. There are other ways to do this. You can also count spaces from the corner and count the height or measure out the height. Yeah, there's different ways of doing it. I could have measured this as well, but it's so easy just to pop the paper on, make a little mark, and use that as a starting point. Right, so I think that it concludes the showing you of what I do on the screen, and I will move down to showing you the actual typewriter and the typing. So I'll just close this for now. Let's see. Right, so here I've got my typewriter, and like many typewriter cases, this one is basically just the top that lifts off, and the bottom of the case is also just the bottom of the typewriter. So the typewriter itself has its bottom, and that forms the bottom of the case. Now this is my first typewriter, as I said, and one of the reasons I chose this is because I wanted something with accent marks. Now, if you buy a normal standard UK or US typewriter, you will find that it has lots of fractions on the special character spaces over here on the right, which is nice, but of course hardly anyone needs those. I mean, like ever. If you want to write a fraction, you can write a number, you can write a slash, and you can write another number, and you're fine. So instead, and of course in English, there are lots of words that can be written, and often I think should be written, with an accent. So here we got circumflex, we got the grave accent, we got diaresis or umlaut, and we got the acute accent. And if you can see this character here, it says IJ on a single character there. You might guess that this is a Dutch typewriter, because in Dutch, IJ is a digraph. Indeed, in older Dutch typewriters, you sometimes see it on, instead of the Y, you have IJ on the Y key, because that is the equivalent in Dutch is the IJ character, which is pronounced I believe. So that is on one character and takes up one character space. I don't use that so much, obviously, but I do like using my accent characters when suitable. So, right, so to get this started, this is in the stowed position now. So this hand needs to come up, and then I can move this around. It's quite a solid. Maybe I should say a little bit about the typewriter itself. This is an Olympia, and of course, as you can see, it says AEG Olympia. So this is after AEG and Olympia merged or got acquired. One got acquired by the other, possibly. I don't know the whole story. This is a Traveler Deluxe, which is a series of typewriters that came out in the, well, the design sort of gives it a little bit away, in the 70s, I do believe the late 70s. It's 100% mechanical. You do get electric and electronic typewriters around the time that this is made, but of course for travel, this is a travel typewriter. It's compact, It's still quite heavy, but it's a compact and light typewriter, relatively speaking. And it's a German brand, but at this time, they had some factories in Yugoslavia. I do believe it was Sarajevo, and so the Olympias, they also made the Olympia, well, they made it under different brands actually, for the Eastern European market as well in Yugoslavia. And this is a German design, but this one is made in Yugoslavia, and it still feels like it's made in Germany because it is just absolutely solidly built, really good quality machine. And of course, the factories in Yugoslavia were run by the Germans, and it was built by the Germans, and they had full control of everything. So, yes, it does have that German build quality to it. That's the paper guy there. Right, so how to get started? So I've got my paper here now with the little mark on it. And I'll just see, I've got my margin. Let's see. So this is my margin setting here. So this little arrow there, you can see that is moving. So maybe I'll just leave it on about 30 there. I'll adjust it as needed. So I want to get I'll move it a little bit to the left actually. So I want to line up my mark roughly with the margin there. So let's see, so about like so. I'll adjust afterwards. So now the paper thing is loose there. Right, so let's roll the paper in. Now, of course, on many typewriters, it sort of ends up a little bit askew very easily. So then you just loosen the roller and you can adjust a little bit like so. Okay. Let's see, where is our mark? There is a mark there. And I'm moving over. You can't really see it now, but it's right about one character to the right of where I started. So I'll move my margin one character to the right. So that is now my starting point. And what else do I need to do to get started? Not really much, really. I can start typing now. Perhaps I should zoom in a little bit now so you can actually see what I'm doing, because it's quite far away from, let's see, and maybe get some more light on. I might have to adjust the focus a little bit as well. Let's see, and the lighting looks good. Focus needs to come in there, and white balance is now off, so I want to make it a little bit warmer like so. Right, so there we are. That's close up on the action. And now I can do my actual typing. So just to show you, first of all, the half space feature. It's something that isn't widely advertised. People don't realize that the typewriters have it. But a lot of the time because whenever you push a key and the key strikes and it lifts up again, then the carriage advances one character. But spacebar is different on many typewriters. What happens is you push the spacebar down, it moves half a space. You lift the spacebar up, it moves another half space. And that is the trick to the half spacing. So that's my backspace there. which is not delete on a typewriter. So one does have to be careful to make sure that one types correctly, which takes a bit of practice, of course. It does feel very different typing on a typewriter keyboard than it does on a computer keyboard. I didn't show that, but of course I have to make sure now my line spacing is just outside of short here, just to set that to 1.5, which is what I want it to be for this one. So I've got Shift. Of course, as you can see, Shift works in 2 different ways on typewriters. Many of the German machines, they have what's called as a carriage shift. So when you push down Shift, the whole carriage, the roller, lifts up like so, which is a bit heavy sometimes. And other machines have a segment shift where the characters, the whole segment of the characters here lifts up a little bit. And of course, these shiftings are adjustable to make sure that it's calibrated properly. So, people. And now, of course, I'm doing not just 1 space, but I'm doing 1.5. So I'm people, and I press space once. But because I'm doing half spacing, and this is sometimes a bit tricky, especially it's a bit tricky for me too because I haven't done this much lately. So I press and hold space, and then I press D. Release space, hold space, E. Like so. And then I have to press twice. And then it's the same again on the next word. So people demand freedom of speech now with 1.5 line spacing. And I press the carriage return on. And of course, for anyone who's seen the return key on a computer keyboard referred to as a CR, or the CR key, that means carriage return, which of course is a term from typewriters. So next line, no half spacing, or no 1.5 spacing. So compensation for the freedom of thought. And now I'm doing 1.5 spaces again. So 1 space, and which they seldom use. Full stop. So I'm now lining up the name of the author. I can just push the carriage to the left now. And because of the half spacing now, it's a little bit tricky. It actually lines up with between I and C. And just do this manually. 1, 2, 3, that's 1.5 line spaces. And I'll just do 5 actually instead of 6 because I think that looks okay. And because now this is not a Norwegian or Danish keyboard, so I can't actually technically write the the second letter in Søren Kierkegaard's name, but because I can cheat a little bit, and I write an O, and I do a backspace, and I can type a slash like so. Because that's what they used to do in Norway and Denmark if they didn't have a correct language keyboard. I think it was even more common in Norway because it's a smaller market and it would be harder to come by a correct keyboard. Indeed, I've seen many of the keyboards on the on Norwegian typewriters in Norway. A lot of the time they were actually Swedish for some reason. And there we are, Søren Kierkegaard. And there we have it. So this is, and just remove it. Of course, I don't have to do like this. I can also just loosen the carriage and pull it out. And There we are. People demand freedom of speech as a compensation for the freedom of thought, which they seldom use. Now, another nice thing about half spaces is that it allows you to write other characters that are not possible on a normal typewriter unless you actually have them on it. And I can actually show you that right away. That was two. I think this is not the normal paper because it seems very thin. I'll just do 2 sheets now because it's good for the carriage to have a little bit more padding. Let's see. Sliding that up a little bit. So, because of the half spacing, there are a few characters that you normally can't do on a Dutch typewriter, and it is, for instance, the one you do get in Danish and Norwegian, and Latin, and also English before I can't remember when it was removed now, early 20th century possibly, the letter A. So you type an A and you go back and you press space and you write an E and you get the letter A. Which still is optional actually in English in some words. You can do the same with the French E. O, half space, E, very useful. Well, I can just show you the IDA digraph, of course, which is a separate key here. But of course, if you didn't have that and you wanted to do an I digraph, you could do an I, half space, J, still looks okay. And of course, you can do this with the capitals as well. So I'll do the E now, the French E. Let's do space and shift, like so. Does not look as good with the A because of the shape of the letter now. It's like so. It still looks okay, I think. And the accent keys are on this and most typewriters, they're known as dead keys, which means that if you do one of them, the carriage does not advance. It just waits for you to type the character that's supposed to go with the accent key. So you can see they're slightly misaligned there, but that's not a big deal. I think that's one of the things that just adds character to a typewriter when characters are a little bit misaligned, because if it's all perfectly aligned and looking really neat and tidy and even, then you might almost as well just use a computer. But if you want a little bit more personality and character in your text, a typewriter does add that. That said, this typewriter actually is quite well aligned so that it's, you can see there's a little bit of difference in height there. The M is a little bit higher than the A and the E. The Y, I'm not sure if you can see that, it's a little bit slanted to the left. So there's little things like that that I think make a typewritten text from a real typewriter more interesting. And this is actually how I ended up getting one in the first place. The thing is, I had a design project where I needed to make something look like it was written on a typewriter. And I sat down and I tried to do it on the computer. But what I realized really quickly was that no matter how good the typewriter font I had, and there aren't actually really any good ones out there, it doesn't look real at all, because on a typewriter font, certainly 99.999% of them, all the characters of each letter will look exactly the same. Whereas on a real typewriter, of course, 2 M's, they will look different. All the O's will look different, etc., etc. There are no 2 characters, even of the same letter, that will look exactly the same. And it comes down to how worn the ribbon is, if it's been used before, the texture of the paper, how hard you press the keys. All those things add up to make it quite a unique look. And of course, this is actually not the best example, because this typewriter is very good for relatively even typing. Whereas some of my other typewriters, they're a lot more sensitive to that little variation in typing pressure, for instance. But so what happened was I realized there was no way I could replicate it. I tried different things in Photoshop with a typewriter font, and it still didn't look right. So in the end, I just thought, well, just go and buy a typewriter then. It seemed like the obvious thing. And I get a typewriter, I can scan it, I can do whatever I will with it afterwards. But the starting point of a real typewriter makes it so much better. So this is one of the reasons why people like typewriters as well. I will make a separate video on that because about the obsolescence of typewriters, because typewriters are obsolete. If you ask someone in a typewriter firm, they might say, oh, no, typewriters are not obsolete because I used one yesterday. But they are obsolete, and I think that's a great thing, and I'll make a separate video about that. So, right, so this is how I do it. This is just my draft now, because my finished text will be on this paper. And I think I made this video long enough now. So basically what I do is just I take this and I just make sure that the is line it's just a draft, you might say, and then I just line it up and do the same thing again on this paper, which looks really nice, by the way. So I think that's it for the moment. I will make more videos about typewriters and typing because I think it's an interesting subject. And I will also make videos about my different typewriters because I think they have quite interesting histories and stories to tell, some of them. My focus went off that. Okay, I need to go back there. Okay, so this was my first one and I'm really happy with it. It's a very nice typewriter to type on. It's the action is a little bit heavy. But I get used to it really quickly. I do have some other ones that are a bit lighter. You don't have to push the keys very hard. And some others that are heavier as well. And yeah, there's good typing technique is something that typing on a computer keyboard doesn't actually teach you. And what you're doing on a typewriter is very different. So some typewriters are more forgiving than others when it comes to correct typing technique. And of course, if you're starting using a typewriter today and buying a mechanical one, which is something I would recommend, but there are some pitfalls when you try to find one. There are some that are more forgiving and of course easier to start with than others. So, and this isn't too bad. This is of course, you might find your fingers are a bit tired to start with, so this is not probably the one I would recommend to start with, but there are some other ones that I will make videos about that I think are great for beginners. So, well, I think that's it for now, and I think this is already way long enough. So this is how I do when I get orders for typewritten text from people on Etsy. This is how my workflow, as it were. Although of course I would do it usually a bit faster and more efficient, and without all the jabbering and the going on about typewriters while I do it, because of course normally when I do it I don't make videos at the same time. So whoever did order the typewritten text, just thank you for that. I don't know if you're ever going to watch this video, but and if anyone else wants to order something written on a real typewriter, I'm available for that. I'll put the link down in the description. I do believe it is in the description, but I'll make a point of it that that's where it is. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time with another video about maybe typewriters, maybe something else. Maybe my next video will be my fighting fantasy game playing, or maybe it will be reading poetry. You just never know, do you? Because I just don't know what I feel like doing next. But it appears that with the strange times we are living in, that there will be plenty of time for me at least to make videos now. So at least that is something. So, thanks for watching again, and goodbye for now.